Hi, I'm Mr. Franklin, and in this video, we're going to talk about describing with quantities for our unit on forces and motion. At this point in our progress and learning about physics, we have talked about measuring things, we've talked about qualitative and quantitative observations. We've started looking at things that move and Newton's first law. We've done an experiment where we watched some objects move and then it drew a graph for us, and we've started our 7-step problem solving process. And in all of that, we really have to have a strong foundation in our quantities, our units, and all the things that those represent. Because, as this says, both the definitions of the quantities and the ways we represent those quantities have to be recognized without looking them up. You need to know that when you see meters per second, that is velocity. On the flip side, if you see the letter V, you need to know that that's velocity measured in meters per second. You need to know all of those connections, and you need to know it without really thinking about it. So this assignment, we're going to practice recognizing what a quantity is and writing down what the quantities, the variable for that is, and the units that are go with it, as well as we're going to look at some situations that are cool and are unique and think about what quantities can we use to describe them. So the first part of this document refreshes and reviews some definitions. They are simplified definitions, ways of talking about them that I've come up with. So I really encourage you to read through them, especially when we get to the observation of something happening and you have to describe it. These definitions could help you figure that out. I've also included a data table that has all of the quantities, their symbols, and units that you will need for this particular assignment. A side note here is I've written meters over seconds. That means meters divided by seconds. I've written it like this because that's really how you should write it if you're writing it by hand. Okay. And that's because when we start doing algebra with different things, you won't mess it up. However, it is perfectly legitimate for you to write it like this. So the first part is your reading quantities. So in the following section, you're going to list all the quantities described for each statement or picture. So we're going to read this statement, and then we're going to fill in the data table with the quantities that we observe in the statement. So a cart with fans on it travels 35 meters. It takes it 12 seconds to travel. So I've already highlighted this one for you. 35 meters, that's a distance, which the symbol is D, and we measure that in meters, and the abbreviation is M. So the point of this is if you see meters, then it's a distance. And all of the things that go with the distance that we're going to connect to distance are connected to it. So even if we represent it with just the letter D, everything that connects to the idea of distance is connected to it. So you should find what's the other measurement, hint, hint. There's the other measurement. So what you would do is right here, type what that quantity is, what's its symbol, what's its unit, what's its abbreviation. And all of that is right up here for you to look at. Okay. So you're going to do that with each one of these. Now, some of these are going to require you to think, what is it really asking me? So you may have to go up to the definition and go, oh, that's not just a force, it's a net force. Okay. So make sure you're reading carefully. Notice this one in particular, this is an equation we haven't looked at yet, but basically it has the symbols are D, A, T squared, V, and T. There are 4 different unique symbols, and so you can fill those out here for the symbols, and then you can put the quantities and the unit. Okay, so this was maybe a little confusing, but this is basically the Orion Delta IV rocket launching the Orion capsule, which is NASA's plan to go to the moon and eventually to Mars, or it's associated with that. And so I've given you some quantities that I've drawn that's representing this rocket sitting on a launch pad. The next one is I've drawn a picture that goes with a 7-step problem. This is not necessarily one that we're going to do in this class, but you can read this. This says meters per second, so you're going to put one for meters per second. Then there's one here that says G equals negative 9.8 meters per second squared. And then we've got D equals question mark. So that's still a representing a quantity. Okay. And then we've got another D right here. So we've got 2 of the same. So you should have 2 of the same thing. Okay. They're not actually the same thing because one is in the y direction and one is in the x direction. But for us, for this class, they will be considered the same thing. Okay, the next thing is you have one animated picture. So you're going to come over here and you're going to describe what you're seeing or what quantities best fit what's going on in the picture. So we've got a bowling ball going down an alley and it strikes some pins. So those are the most obvious ones that I was thinking of, but does the bowling ball cover a distance? Yes. So the bowling ball is moving across a distance down a bowling lane with some velocity. It knocks down some pins with a force. The pins move with a velocity all over the place. Okay? And you could even talk about the force of the pins hitting one another or whatever, but we're basing it off of this picture. Okay? So use the quantities to describe what's going on. Okay? Just so you get an idea of interpreting what we see in terms of the physics language. So next, you have the next three things are video links. So like in each one of them, I've tried to give you a timestamp where you just watch for about 30 seconds and you should be good to go. So the first one is the Blue Angels Fat Albert. Then you will have Lightning Strike, which that one's actually a long video. What you're going to describe is there are basically there's electrons, there's charged particles that are moving down this. So you could describe what do you see happening? Okay, so you could think about that. It's also traveling in a downward direction, which means that gravity is at work. So you could also talk about some forces and things like that as well. All right, the next one is Starship SN8 flight test. This one's kind of a longer video. You can watch the whole thing, but this is part of SpaceX. You can watch that and describe what you see in terms of our quantities. And so you're going to do that. So it should be, 2 to 3 sentences, and that should be sufficient to describe what's going on. If you have any questions or aren't sure, please ask your teacher. Otherwise, that is all I've got, and enjoy watching some of those cool videos. All right, see ya. Bye.